The chamber fell silent as Supreme Commander Thelax's holographic display showed another coalition world reduced to cosmic dust. 17 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched helplessly as their fleets crumbled before the void. Hegemony, a hive mind species that consumed stars like a cosmic plague. The Arcturian commander's forearms trembled as he delivered the verdict. At current trajectories, total defeat occurs in 3 solar cycles. Ambassador Zentari slammed her crystalline appendage against the table. Impossible. We have the superior technology, the resources, the experience, and yet we lose, Thelax whispered, his scales dulling in distress. From the shadows stepped Zarleth, his ancient eyes glowing with forbidden knowledge. There is one option we haven't considered. The Cygnus diplomat activated a sealed archive that displayed a blue-green world. Planet designation, Earth. Species, human. Quarantined for 50,000 cycles. The chamber erupted in protests. Everyone knew of the humans, the galaxy's unpredictable variable. Footage showed humans leaping from burning buildings to save strangers, continuing to fight despite horrific injuries, and forming emotional bonds with non-sentient creatures. Their neural patterns defied all logic. They willingly faced death. For abstract concepts, found pleasure in simulated danger, and somehow functioned optimally when systems were breaking down. Their biochemistry alone makes them walking catastrophes, Chief Scientist Vixara noted. Adrenaline responses that override rational thought, endorphin rewards for risk-taking behavior, and pain suppression mechanisms that let them ignore physical damage. Commander Thelax studied the humans thoughtfully. The hegemony thrives on predictability. They've calculated every coalition response because we fight logically. He looked around at his peers. Perhaps what our perfectly ordered military needs is a species that dances in the flames of chaos. Dr. Eleanor Chen rubbed her eyes as quantum equations blurred before her. Past midnight at the International Space Coalition Laboratory, she reached for her coffee just as the air crackled with electromagnetic energy. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor as 3 impossible beings materialized. One resembled a mantis woven from starlight. Another seemed made of living mercury. The third, vaguely humanoid with iridescent scales, stepped forward with a device that projected words into her mind. Dr. Chen, we are the Galactic Coalition. Earth has been quarantined for your protection. That protection must now end. Within hours, the visitors had proven their authenticity by casually altering the fundamental constants of a controlled environment, demonstrating technology centuries beyond human imagination. When they activated dormant monitoring stations hidden beneath Earth's oceans and on the far side of the moon, the truth became undeniable. President Santos stood before the hastily assembled United Nations, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. We are not alone. We never were. In the Pentagon's deepest sublevel, Ambassador Zarleth watched footage of human warfare with growing bewilderment. His multifaceted eyes widened at soldiers throwing themselves on grenades, firefighters rushing into burning buildings, and protesters standing before tanks. Your species willingly faces death for ideas, he noted, mandibles clicking in distress. For concepts with no physical form. Freedom, justice, love. He tilted his alien head. Is this normal? General Park nodded simply. It's what makes a human. Zarleth's translator couldn't fully capture the emotional resonance when he said, the void hegemony processes everything through cold calculation. They cannot comprehend a species that values something beyond survival. He lowered his voice. Neither can we, truthfully. And that is precisely why you might save us all. The alien emissaries shared visuals of the hegemony's advance, worlds, reduced to barren husks, entire species assimilated into the collective. Dr. Chen analyzed the battle footage, noting patterns that even coalition tacticians had missed. They fight like a supercomputer, she observed. Perfect, predictable, and utterly inflexible. Coalition bioscanners hummed as they studied human physiology. The chief medical officer, a crystalline entity named Vixara, recoiled at human neural readings. Your brains contain structures dedicated to recognizing patterns that don't exist. You see faces in random configurations. You detect intentions where there are none. You imagine outcomes with no statistical basis. We call it intuition, Chen explained. We would call it malfunction, Vixara replied. In less than 1 Earth week, humanity processed what philosophers had speculated about for millennia: contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Stock markets crashed, then stabilized. Religious leaders issued statements ranging from apocalyptic to transcendent. Military forces worldwide shifted to high alert, then stood down as understanding spread. The real threat came from beyond our solar system. General Zhang studied coalition battle records with growing concern. You've been fighting a chess master, while following the rules of chess. No wonder you're losing. And what do humans do? Ambassador Zarleth asked. Zhang smiled thinly. When the game is unwinnable, we flip the board. President Santos addressed her cabinet, eyes hollow from sleepless nights reviewing coalition data. They've offered us technology, resources, everything they can spare, but what they really want is something they don't have and can't duplicate. What's that, Madam President? She stared at the holographic projection of hegemony battle formations. Perfect, mathematical, unstoppable. Chaos, unpredictability. The human capacity to do the completely irrational thing at exactly the right moment. She closed the projection with a swipe of her hand. They need us because we're insane by their standards. And God help us, we're going to war among the stars. 8 weeks after first contact, training facilities erupted across Earth's surface as the newly formed human expeditionary force prepared for war among the stars. Earth's nations united with shocking speed, former enemies now comrades against an existential threat. Captain Maya Ortega stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance, the first human to command an interspecies combat team. The ship's neural interface repeatedly rejected her. Coalition systems couldn't process the erratic patterns of human cognition. Your thought patterns spike with electrical activity we classify as dangerous, explained Chief Engineer Loxaria, 6 tentacles manipulating holographic controls. The safety protocols automatically disconnect to prevent neural damage, Captain Ortega smirked. That's just how humans think. We call it intuition. During a routine navigation exercise, alarms blared as the ship's propulsion core destabilized. Coalition crew followed emergency procedures, systematically working through safety protocols while disaster loomed. Ortega watched the countdown to core breach, saw the alien crew's methodical response, and made an impossible decision. She physically ripped out the neural safety regulators and jammed her interface directly into the ship's primary cortex, screaming, as raw data flooded her mind. Her hands flew across controls never designed for human operation, bypassing 12 critical safety systems simultaneously. The ship stabilized seconds before catastrophic failure. Impossible, whispered Commander Thelax as medical teams revived the unconscious human. She processed solutions our engineers considered theoretically prohibited. The Ortega maneuver entered coalition tactical databases with a warning label. The war room, General Wei Zhang studied coalition battle formations with growing concern. The alien strategies emphasize perfect positioning, predictable responses, and above all, minimizing casualties. You fight like you're trying not to lose, Zhang said, rearranging holographic fleet markers. We fight to win, whatever the cost. He proposed asymmetrical tactics, feigned retreats, and sacrificial positioning that made the coalition admirals physically ill. Your formations prioritize preserving lives over achieving objectives, Zhang explained gently, against an enemy that treats individuals as cells in a larger organism. This approach guarantees defeat. That night, Commander Thelax recorded in his private log, "We sought a weapon against the hegemony. I fear instead we've unleashed something far more dangerous. A species that treats impossibility as merely another obstacle to overcome." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, daughter of Dr. Eleanor Chen, mastered alien weaponry systems with alarming speed. Coalition combat instructors watched in horror as she deliberately disabled safety protocols on energy weapons, doubling their power output while halving their operational lifespan. The weapon will destabilize after 27 shots, warned Weapons Master Krexel. Then we'll make those 27 shots count, Chen replied, adjusting the targeting system to fire at angles the Coalition deemed wasteful, but that humans called covering fire. Meanwhile, Coalition xenobiologists struggled to understand human stress responses. Their medical databases classified adrenaline as the emergency hormone to be carefully managed. They watched in astonishment as human combat teams artificially induced stress states before simulations. "You deliberately trigger your fight-or-flight response?" asked Medical Officer Neelix, recording unprecedented neural activity in her human subjects. "Gets the blood flowing," Sergeant Rodriguez explained, performing jumping exercises before a combat drill. "When everything goes sideways, you want that extra edge." The Coalition's training facilities, designed for precision and safety, underwent radical modifications to accommodate human methodology. Simulation difficulties increased beyond recommended parameters. Live fire exercises incorporated actual danger. Energy shield tolerances were reduced to minimum survivable rather than optimally protective. Coalition commanders observed human training with growing alarm. These creatures didn't just accept risk, they incorporated it as a fundamental element of their strategy. When battle simulations ended in defeat, humans didn't retreat to safety protocols. They analyzed failures and tried again, often with even riskier approaches. They learned from death, noted Tactical Officer Zillith, reviewing simulation data where human teams had perished dozens of times before achieving their objective. Each failure refines their approach rather than reinforcing caution. As joint operations prepared for their first real combat engagement, Commander Thilax addressed the mixed Coalition human command staff. "For 1,000 years we have fought defensively, retreating strategically, preserving lives while surrendering territory. Today we try something new." He nodded to General Zhang. "Today we fight like humans." The Void Hegemony vessels emerged from subspace like a black tide. Thousands of biomechanical ships surrounding the Proxima Centauri system. Humanity's nearest stellar neighbor would be their first battlefield among the stars. The Coalition fleet arranged itself in textbook defensive formations, their tactics refined over centuries of warfare. The Hegemony responded with equally predictable counterformations. This cosmic chess match had played out countless times before, always ending in Coalition retreat. But this time, something changed. Without warning, small human-crewed vessels broke formation, accelerating to speeds their alien allies had calculated as unsurvivable. These gunships darted between Hegemony capital ships, weapons blazing in seemingly random patterns that defied tactical analysis. "What are they doing?" demanded Commander Thilax as alerts flashed across his command center. "Those attack vectors make no sense." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, human tactical liaison, smiled grimly. "They're not supposed to make sense. We're introducing chaos into a system that depends on order." Aboard the damaged frigate Defiance, Lieutenant Commander Jackson watched his ship's systems fail one by one. A Hegemony energy weapon had sheared off the port section, killing half his crew instantly. Life support failed. Structural integrity collapsed. The Defiance tumbled toward a massive Hegemony command node, the central processing hub connecting thousands of ships. "Engines are gone, sir," reported his helmsman, blood streaming from a head wound. "We're being pulled into their gravitational well." Jackson's smile gleamed in the emergency lighting. "Then let's give them a proper greeting." He opened the fleet-wide comm channel. "This is Defiance. We are on collision course with primary target. Request permission to execute Protocol Alamo." Coalition Command couldn't process the request fast enough. Jackson cut the channel and addressed his remaining crew. "It's been an honor. Let's show these hive-mind monstrosities how humans say goodbye." The Defiance's reactor containment disengaged manually. The crippled ship accelerated, trailing plasma and debris as it plunged into the Hegemony command node. The resulting explosion rippled through the enemy fleet, disrupting the hive coordination that made them unstoppable. In the observation deck, Science Officer Zillith watched in stunned silence. They deliberately sacrificed themselves to create tactical advantage, she noted in her log, mandibles trembling. And the transmissions, they were laughing as they did it. In the aftermath, Coalition medics struggled with human patients who kept attempting to return to battle despite severe injuries. You've lost a significant quantity of blood in 2 limbs, Physician Cast Nixala told Captain Ortega, who was attempting to reattach her prosthetic arm. It's just a flesh wound. Ortega shrugged, using her teeth to tighten a connector. As the hegemony fleet retreated in disarray, their collective consciousness experienced something new in their million-year existence. They could not predict what their enemy would do next. The sensation rippled through their hive mind like poison. The feeling had no name in their collective vocabulary. Humans called it fear. Captain Ortega supervised damage control operations from a makeshift command center, her newly attached prosthetic arm still calibrating to her neural patterns. Coalition medical officers had prioritized senior officers for treatment, a protocol she immediately overrode. Treat the engineers first, she ordered. We need propulsion and weapons more than command. Staff. This violation of hierarchical triage protocols bewildered the Coalition medics, but demonstrated another uniquely human trait: adaptable command structures that prioritized function over rank when circumstances required. Meanwhile, Coalition intelligence officers dissected the battle data with growing astonishment. The human-led strike teams had executed maneuvers with only 17% chance of success, according to standard probability models. Yet most had succeeded. How did your commanders calculate such high-risk operations would work? Asked strategic analyst Variax, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion. Lieutenant Chen's answer stunned the alien strategists. They didn't calculate. They trusted their gut. The concept of gut feelings, intuitive decision-making based on pattern recognition too complex for conscious processing, baffled Coalition tacticians. Their entire strategic doctrine was built on mathematical models and probability assessments. In emergency strategic sessions, Coalition High Command struggled to integrate this human approach into their battle plans. Commander Thilax finally summarized the problem. For a millennium, we've treated warfare as an equation to be solved. Humans treat it as a chaotic system to be navigated. Both approaches have merits, but only one has given us victory. The human-led victory at Proxima Centauri reverberated throughout Coalition space. News of the first major hegemony defeat spread rapidly, along with stories of human valor that alien translators struggled to properly convey. Concepts like going down fighting and last stands required extensive cultural footnotes. Admiral Zhang reviewed casualty reports with Coalition officers, who expected him to be devastated by the losses. Instead, he nodded grimly and began planning the next offensive. You seem accepting of these deaths, noted Commander Thilax carefully. Each soldier knew the risk, Zhang replied. We honor their sacrifice by making sure it wasn't wasted. This perspective, treating death in battle not as tragedy but as meaningful sacrifice, added another dimension to the Coalition's evolving understanding of humanity. They began to comprehend that humans didn't value life less. They valued purpose more. The observation chamber hummed with sophisticated equipment as Medical Officer Neelix adjusted sensors, monitoring Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. Dozens of xenobiologists from 17 species crowded behind one-way glass, recording every nuance of the human specimen before them. Your adrenal gland activated during the ambush on Outpost 7, Neelix noted, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she studied neural scans. Blood cortisol levels indicate extreme stress response. Heart rate elevated to 172 beats per minute, yet camera footage shows you charging directly toward the hegemony drones. Rodriguez sipped her coffee, unimpressed by the alien's bewilderment. So? You experienced fear, Neelix clarified. Yet you ran toward the danger, not away from it. How? The sergeant shrugged. That's the job, ma'am. Everyone's scared. You just do it anyway. The medical officer's translator glitched, unable to process the concept. The linguists recalibrated, but the cognitive dissonance remained. Throughout Coalition space, similar scenes played out as alien researchers documented human capabilities. With growing fascination, Marines functioning effectively after 72 hours without sleep. Engineers improvising weapons from cooking equipment. A wounded pilot who sealed a hull breach with her flight suit and survived decompression for 9 minutes, laughing about it afterward. Coalition psychologists classified these behaviors under a new term, transcendent determination, the uniquely human ability to acknowledge limitations while simultaneously refusing to accept them. Meanwhile, the hegemony adapted. Their hive intelligence analyzed human unpredictability and launched coordinated strikes against 3 coalition worlds simultaneously. In Coalition Command, alien strategists prepared standard defensive protocols. General Wei Zhang slammed his fist on the holographic display, disrupting their carefully arranged formations. "The hegemony expects us to defend," he said, rearranging the fleet markers into an entirely new configuration. "They've studied our patterns and calculated our response, so let's do something they cannot anticipate. Let's attack." Attack? While our worlds are under siege? The Coalition Admiral's translator struggled with the emotional overtones. "Precisely because our worlds are under siege," Zhang explained, highlighting hegemony staging areas beyond the battle zones. "They've committed resources expecting us to respond exactly as you have for 1,000 years. They've left their support infrastructure exposed." Operation Thunderstrike launched within hours. Simultaneous human-led assaults against hegemony, staging areas, supply depots, and drone manufacturing hubs. For the first time in their ancient conflict, the hegemony faced an opponent that struck at their undefended centers rather than reactively defending. Coalition intelligence intercepted hegemony communications revealing chaotic patterns never before observed in their hive mind. The collective had encountered something outside their predictive models, an enemy that used apparent weakness as strategic misdirection. In their billion-year existence, the void hegemony had consumed countless civilizations. None had ever attacked while being attacked themselves. None had laughed in the face of certain death. None had willingly sacrificed individual survival for collective victory. The concept did not compute, and in that cognitive breakdown, something new emerged in the hive consciousness, a realization that their models could not predict human behavior. Humans called it doubt. In the depths of the Coalition flagship, technicians monitored human biosignals during combat operations. What they discovered defied their understanding of sapient physiology. Under extreme stress, conditions that would trigger shutdown in Coalition species, human brains showed increased activity in areas governing creativity and problem-solving. There, cognitive function improves under conditions that would incapacitate our officers, reported Chief Researcher Vexara. When death seems most certain, their mental processing accelerates rather than deteriorates. The data suggested something that Coalition evolutionary scientists had never encountered, a species that evolved to think better when survival was threatened, not worse. On the medical deck, Coalition physicians documented another perplexing phenomenon. Injured humans healed faster when they returned to their units than when kept in medical isolation. Their morale, a concept that required extensive translation, directly influenced physical recovery rates. They heal through social connection, noted medical administrator Zilzatep, as if their bodies respond to emotional imperatives rather than purely biological ones. At Strategic Command, Admiral Thelax reviewed the results of Operation Thunderstrike with mixed emotions. The human-led counteroffensive had inflicted unprecedented damage on hegemony infrastructure, but the casualty reports showed losses that would have been unacceptable under Coalition protocols. "How do you justify this expenditure of lives?" he asked General Zhang privately. The human commander's response haunted Thelax for days afterward. "We don't measure victory by how many survive, but by what they died to achieve. A universe free from the hegemony is worth any price." This perspective, that the value of life extended beyond its mere continuation, challenged the core of Coalition philosophy. They had fought defensively for a millennium, prioritizing survival above victory. Humans inverted this equation, treating survival as merely one factor in a complex moral calculation that included abstract concepts like freedom, justice, and legacy. As the hegemony regrouped from unexpected losses, their collective intelligence devoted unprecedented resources to understanding human psychology. Their initial assessment, that humans were simply erratic and unpredictable, evolved into something more troubling. Humans weren't random. They operated according to principles the hegemony could not process, principles that somehow transformed apparent weakness into strength. Lieutenant Grace Kim stood before the Coalition Strategic Command, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive aliens surrounding her. The holographic display showed the Epsilon Eridani system, the next likely hegemony target, with its gas giant Hyperion prominently featured. "You've been trying to defend planets for 1,000 years, Kim said, manipulating the display to zoom in on the gas giant's swirling atmosphere. "What if we used a planet as a weapon instead?" The chamber fell silent. 17 species exchanged looks of incomprehension. "Lieutenant Kim," began Chief Engineer Vorax, his crystalline form shimmering with distress. "Planets are not weapons. They are naturally occurring celestial bodies." Kim smiled. "Until they're not." Her fingers danced across the controls, highlighting the gas giant's composition. "Hyperion's atmosphere contains exotic hydrogen compounds under tremendous pressure. We can trigger a cascading fusion reaction with specialized warheads planted at these coordinates." The Coalition representatives recoiled physically from the display. "You propose destroying a planet?" Ambassador Zarleth's translator conveyed his horror perfectly. "Not destroying," Kim corrected. "Weaponizing. The reaction would be contained, but would release an electromagnetic pulse wave powerful enough to disable any ships within half a light year. We lure the hegemony fleet into position, then light the match." Coalition ethicists debated for 3 days while engineers reluctantly began implementation. The concept violated their most fundamental principles, adapting to environments rather than changing them. Humans, they realized, saw the universe not as a fixed reality to navigate, but as raw material to reshape according to their needs. They named it the Prometheus Protocol, after a human myth about stealing fire from gods. When the hegemony fleet arrived at Epsilon Eridani, they deployed in their standard formation, a mathematical perfection based on 1,000 years of battle data. They detected the unusual coalition positioning, but calculated it as a tactical error. They did not calculate that humans would ignite a gas giant. The specialized warheads detonated in sequence, creating a controlled reaction that rippled through Hyperion's atmosphere. The planet glowed like a newborn star for 7 minutes before stabilizing. The electromagnetic tsunami that radiated outward rendered a third of the hegemony fleet inert, their organic mechanical systems overloaded beyond recovery. Coalition. Observers watched in stunned silence as human crews erupted in celebration, consuming fermented beverages, engaging in synchronized physical movements they called dancing, and chanting victory songs that translated poorly into alien languages. Meanwhile, on Earth, human scientists reverse-engineered Coalition technology with alarming speed. Unlike their alien counterparts, they showed no reverence for established principles, combining technologies in ways the original designers considered sacrilegious. "They're grafting our photonic processors into their crude ballistic weapons," reported Science Director Vezinar, mandibles clicking in agitation. "They've improved efficiency by 320% by removing all safety limitations. The hybrid technologies spread throughout the human fleet, weapons and defenses that operated on principles even the hegemony's predictive algorithms couldn't anticipate, because they violated the fundamental engineering principles that all spacefaring civilizations had independently developed." Commander Thilax convened an emergency council with the Coalition's highest authorities, sealing the chamber against all surveillance. "We sought a weapon against the hegemony," he said quietly, his scales dulled with stress. "Instead, we've liberated a caged predator. They reshape planets. They laugh while dying. They modify technology that has been stable for millennia." He looked each leader in their equivalent of eyes. The question we must now consider is whether these humans can ever be returned to their cage once this war concludes. In the silence that followed, the distant sound of human celebration echoed through the station corridors. The aftermath of the Hyperion event reverberated across Coalition space. For the first time, civilian populations witnessed human innovation firsthand. The recordings of a gas giant temporarily igniting into a weapon elicited both terror and fascination among species that had evolved to see environmental stability as sacrosanct. Lieutenant Kim found herself suddenly elevated to scientific advisor, with Coalition engineers approaching her with questions they would have considered blasphemous months earlier. Could we modify a neutron star's magnetic field to create defensive barriers? Could asteroid belts be reconfigured as kinetic weapon arrays? The conceptual barriers between natural and artificial began to dissolve as humans introduced their most revolutionary concept. Nature itself was merely raw material waiting to be shaped. On Earth, similar transformations occurred as Coalition technology merged with human innovation. Dr. Eleanor Chen supervised integration teams where human engineers casually disassembled alien devices considered inviolable by their creators. "You can't just reconfigure the quantum resonance chamber," protested Coalition technician Zexel. "The principles were established by the founder civilizations millennia ago." The human engineer merely shrugged. "Works better this way." She demonstrated the modified device, which performed at 217% efficiency while consuming half the energy. Coalition observers recorded these interactions with growing concern. Humans didn't merely use technology. They reimagined it. They didn't respect established principles, they challenged them. And most disturbing, they treated impossible as merely a temporary designation for things not yet accomplished. In his private chambers, Ambassador Zarleth studied human history with newfound understanding. Their brief technological evolution showed a pattern now recognizable. They had always reshaped their environment rather than adapting to it. They diverted rivers, tunneled through mountains, modified the genetic code of plants and animals. Even their own bodies were subject to enhancement and modification. They see themselves as separate from nature, he recorded in his report to the High Council. Not subjects of natural law, but its masters. And now, with our technology in their hands, they apply this mindset to the cosmos itself. The implications terrified him. If humans prevailed against the hegemony, what would stop them from remaking the galaxy according to their vision? What principles would guide a species that treated reality as malleable? The hegemony vessel materialized at the edge of Sol System. Not a warship, but a diplomatic craft, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns signaling peaceful intent. Coalition sensors detected unusual signal configurations emanating from the organic-mechanical hybrid. "They're requesting direct communication," announced Tactical Officer Vrelenex. "With humans only." The implications sent shockwaves through Coalition command. After 7 consecutive defeats, the Void hegemony, a cosmic force that had never negotiated in its billion-year expansion, wanted to talk. But only to the newcomers. In the hastily prepared neutral station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Eleanor Chen faced the hegemony emissary, a writhing mass of translucent tissue housing a neural network visible through its semi-transparent membrane. 17. Mechanical arms extended from its central mass, each ending in different sensory or manipulative appendages. "Human," it began, its voice a synthetic approximation transmitted directly to her auditory implant. "We propose terms. Your planet Earth remains untouched. Your colonies remain sovereign. Your species continues existence." Chen's expression remained neutral. "In exchange for human withdrawal from Coalition alliance, immediate cessation of human military activity against hegemony expansion." Coalition intelligence confirmed their worst fears through encrypted channels. The hegemony had identified humans specifically as the critical variable in recent defeats. They sought to isolate the unpredictable element from the equation. "Why target humans specifically?" Chen asked, watching the neural patterns pulse within the emissary's translucent form. "We're technologically inferior to the Coalition. We have fewer resources, fewer ships." The emissary's appendages rippled in what might have been agitation. Your query reveals the fundamental problem. You do not understand your own unique property. Explain. The neural patterns within the emissary flashed chaotically before stabilizing. The hegemony has consumed 4,927 sapient species across 9 galaxies. Each followed predictable patterns based on biological imperatives: survival prioritization, resource competition, logical response to stimuli. It extended an appendage toward Chen. Your species defies these universal constants. You willingly embrace temporary non-existence for abstract concepts. You choose actions with higher probability of individual termination to increase collective success probability. You introduce intentional chaos into systems requiring order. The creature's neural patterns pulsed rapidly. Most concerning, this behavior spreads to other species in contact with humans. Coalition tactics now demonstrate human-like unpredictability. This represents existential threat to hegemony continuity. Chen realized with sudden clarity. The hegemony feared not human technology or numbers, but human unpredictability. Their willingness to sacrifice individual survival for abstract principles like loyalty and freedom created decision trees the hive mind couldn't process. Your offer is declined, Chen said, rising from her seat. Humanity doesn't abandon its pack. Even if our new pack has tentacles and exoskeletons, the emissary's neural patterns fragmented momentarily. Illogical response. You choose potential species extinction over guaranteed survival. Welcome to humanity, Chen smiled. We specialize in illogical responses. As the hegemony vessel prepared to depart, it transmitted a final message, a concept previously unrecorded in their extensive communication history. Coalition linguists needed weeks to translate the alien thought form. The closest human equivalent: regret. Coalition xenopsychologists studied recordings of the encounter obsessively. The hegemony emissary had displayed something unprecedented. In their documented history, cognitive dissonance. The hive mind's neural patterns had exhibited fragmentation when confronted with human decision-making. They cannot compute loyalty that transcends species boundaries, noted Chief Analyst Zex Vara. A hive mind cannot conceptualize sacrificing collective advantage for external entities. Meanwhile, human diplomatic corps prepared for possible further negotiations. Ambassador Santos assembled a team to study the hegemony's communication patterns, seeking vulnerabilities in their cognitive framework. Every consciousness has blind spots, she explained to coalition advisors. The hegemony cannot process certain concepts. Those are our weapons, not just chips and bombs, but ideas themselves. Coalition philosophers whose disciplines had stagnated for millennia suddenly found themselves consulting with human counterparts about concepts they had never considered. The idea that abstract principles could serve as effective weapons against a material enemy sparked intellectual revolutions across 17 species. They've weaponized philosophy, marveled elder thinker Voxelath of the Cygnus intellectual caste. Even our thoughts become battlefields. In classified strategic sessions, human leaders debated the implications of the hegemony's offer. They're afraid of us, General Zhang observed, not our weapons but our minds. They fear what they cannot predict. Dr. Chen presented her analysis of the neural recordings. The emissary experienced neural pattern disruption when processing our response. The concept of choosing alliance over self-preservation created a logic loop they couldn't resolve. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, his cybernetic enhancements glinting in the holographic light, leaned forward. Then we push that advantage. If unpredictability is our weapon, let's become even more unpredictable. The resulting Operation Cognitive Dissonance represented warfare unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships began broadcasting philosophical paradoxes on hegemony communication frequencies. Combat teams deployed with inconsistent, seemingly irrational tactics specifically designed to create pattern recognition failures in the hive mind. Most effective was the human sacrifice gambit. Situations deliberately engineered where humans could be observed choosing the welfare of alien allies over human survival, a concept so alien to the hegemony that it created processing failures in their tactical neural networks. Ambassador Zarlith watched these developments with growing appreciation of human complexity. They've identified the hegemony's fundamental weakness, he noted in his private journal. A hive mind cannot comprehend individuality that chooses to override self-interest. Humans weaponize the very concepts the enemy cannot process. The hegemony's subsequent tactical adjustments revealed growing desperation. Their formations became erratic, abandoning the mathematical precision that had defined them for millennia. They were attempting to mimic human unpredictability, but without understanding the underlying principles that guided human decisions, they merely created chaos within their own ranks. Operation Endgame began in darkness. 10,000 coalition vessels emerged from subspace surrounding the hegemony central node, a massive computational structure orbiting a stolen neutron star. At its core lay the original consciousness that had spread across 9 galaxies, consuming thousands of civilizations. For the first time in the Coalition's history, humans commanded every battle group. Coalition precision merged with human audacity as Captain Ortega's voice echoed across all channels. Remember Earth. Remember every world they've taken. Today we end this. The battle that followed would be studied for millennia. Standard coalition formations dissolved into chaotic attack vectors guided by human intuition rather than algorithmic optimization. Solar flares were harnessed as weapons. Drone swarms followed sacrificial tactics never before conceived in galactic warfare. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, rebuilt with coalition cybernetics after his previous sacrifice, led the final assault on the central node itself. His voice, calm, amid the chaos, directed strike teams through impossible defensive grids. The universe gave us one gift the hegemony never understood, he told his mixed human-alien crew as they breached the final barrier. We know we're going to die someday. That knowledge makes everything we do matter. The battle cost millions of lives but achieved what 1,000 years of logical warfare could not. The hegemony's central node collapsed, its collective consciousness fragmenting. The remnants fled beyond the galactic rim, their hive mind shattered into isolated pockets. Indio. Victory's aftermath, the coalition faced a new dilemma. Their saviors were also potentially their greatest threat. Humanity, now armed with advanced technology and battle experience, could never return to ignorant quarantine. Commander Thelax, his scales now bearing the scars of combat alongside humans, addressed the coalition assembly on their capital world. The Grand Chamber, once segregated by species, now showed integration previously unimaginable, with humans scattered throughout every delegation. For 50,000 cycles, we observed humanity from afar, fearing their unpredictability. Thelax began, his voice resonating through the hall. Today, I propose something unprecedented. Full coalition membership for Earth, effective immediately. Protests erupted from traditionalists. The standard protocol required a millennium of supervised integration for new species. Humans had been fighting alongside them for barely 2 years. They have earned it with blood and innovation, Thelax countered. And practically speaking, could any force in this galaxy return them to isolation now? The silence that followed confirmed what everyone knew. The cage had been opened. The predators had proven themselves allies. Captain Maya Ortega, her prosthetic arm gleaming with coalition technology, stepped forward to speak for humanity. Her uniform bore the scars of 12 battles across star systems. We came as warriors because that's what you needed, she said, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. But humans are more than fighters. We're explorers seeking new horizons. We're creators who see possibility where others see limits. We're dreamers who imagine worlds that don't yet exist. We don't just survive chaos. We find beauty in it. Throughout coalition space, the rigid structures that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years began to shift. Alien species experimented with human music, duplicating the strange harmonies that evoked emotional responses they hadn't known they could experience. Philosophers incorporated human concepts like hope and wonder into traditional thought structures. Military academies studied the human factor in strategic planning. The monitoring stations around Earth were dismantled, replaced by cultural exchange centers where humans taught aliens about chocolate, jazz, and the strange concept they called humor. Coalition ships arrived bearing scientists, diplomats, and ordinary citizens eager to understand these strange beings who laughed in the face of death. In the central park of the New Earth Embassy, Ambassador Zarleth watched human children playing alongside the offspring of 17 alien species. Little ones with scales, tentacles, and crystalline structures chased each other through the artificial gravity field, their laughter requiring no translation. Perhaps, he reflected to Dr. Chen as they observed this impossible scene, what the universe truly needed was not your capacity for war, but your capacity for change. Chen smiled, watching a human child teaching a young Arcturian a game involving colored stones. That's humanity's real superpower. We're never just one thing, for long. Across the galaxy, memorials honored the millions who had fallen in the final battle. Unlike traditional coalition monuments, solemn static structures of remembrance, human-designed memorials incorporated living elements, gardens that bloomed in patterns matching the formations of fleet movements, holographic displays where visitors could interact with historical simulations, walls where people of any species could leave personal messages for those lost. They memorialized differently, noted historian Cast Virith as she studied the human approach, not just preserving the past but making it part of an evolving future. The Coalition's scientific community undergoes its own revolution. For millennia, their research had focused on incremental improvements to established technologies. Human scientists introduced radical methodologies, encouraging failed experiments, prioritizing outlier data, deliberately combining incompatible systems to see what emerged. They seek the anomaly rather than the pattern, reported Chief Researcher Zexeth. They deliberately destabilize functional systems to discover new possibilities. At first, these approaches seemed reckless, but as breakthroughs multiplied across disciplines, even the most conservative coalition researchers began adopting human techniques. The resulting technological renaissance brought advancements that 1,000 years of traditional research might never have uncovered. Some feared the changes humanity brought. Conservative factions warned that human influence would destabilize galactic civilization. Those fears gradually subsided as humans demonstrated their capacity for more than destruction. Establishing interspecies cultural festivals, adapting coalition diplomatic protocols to accommodate emotional expression, and building hybrid communities, where diverse biology became strength rather than obstacle. What no observer could dismiss was the psychological transformation spreading through coalition civilization. Species that had existed in rigid castes for millions of years began questioning their structures. Societies that had valued stability above all else began embracing calculated risk. Citizens who had accepted the inevitability of gradual retreat before the hegemony now spoke of actively shaping their future. Dr. Eleanor Chen, who had greeted the first coalition representatives in her laboratory years before, now directed the Galactic Cultural Integration Institute. In her address to the first graduating class of mixed-species diplomats, she captured the essence of humanity's gift to the stars. The hegemony failed because it could only consume what already existed. We prevailed because humans create what has never been. When the universe says impossible, humanity asks why not. When confronted with certain defeat, we imagine victory. When facing extinction, we dream of legacy. This is the gift we bring to the coalition. Not our technology or our tactics, but our ability to see beyond what is to what could be. In the darkness between galaxies, remnants of the once mighty hegemony drift, their hive mind fragmented into isolated pockets. Within their collective memory banks, new patterns emerge, attempts to simulate human thinking, to model unpredictability, to understand the species that defeated them. They cannot fully comprehend the concepts, but the attempt itself represents something unprecedented in their billion-year existence. The universe trembles when humans join the battle, not because of their weapons or their warriors, but because they transform every battlefield they touch. They redefine the very meaning of victory, and in doing so, they rewrite the future of all species brave enough to call them allies. Across the galaxy, former enemies and allies alike came to understand a fundamental truth. The universe trembles when humans join the battle, not because of their physical strength or technological prowess, but because they transform every battlefield they touch. They reshape not just the physical space around them, but the very concepts that define existence. In the darkness between stars, fragments of the once mighty hegemony drifted, their collective consciousness forever altered by contact with a species that defied categorization. Within their fractured memory banks, a single human concept took root and blossomed, something they had never encountered in billions of years of consuming civilizations. The humans called it hope.